Hello, everyone. So, today let's look at how to craft an effective research proposal. So, here today I'm going to simply teach you on how to develop a research proposal which looks so professional. Right. So, this is the agenda for our today's discussion. First, we are going to look at the content of a research proposal. Then a simple example for you to understand on how to write this particular research proposal based on the requirements of each and every subtopics in your research proposal. So let's move to one by one the content of a research proposal. Now, if you look at the content of a research proposal, first I want to tell you that we don't have chapters in your research proposal. Now, if you look at a research report, you may have 5 to 6 chapters depending on the requirements of your particular institutions or the degree program. So you have your introduction chapter, literature review chapter, methodology chapter, results chapter, discussion chapter, and conclusion. So you have 6 chapters. But sometimes you are going to combine both results chapter with the discussion chapter. Accordingly, you have only 5 chapters. But when it's come to the research proposals, as I already indicated, you don't have chapters, rather you have subtopics. Now, these are the subtopics that we are going to learn when developing the research proposal. Now, the first one is you have the working title. Right now, here I have used the term working title because till the end of the completion and the submission of your research report, your title could be changed in a minor way. So that's why I have written it as working title. And we have discussed in our previous video on how to develop a research topic. So better you watch it and come into this particular video for the expanded or for the further understanding. So your research proposal should consist with a working title, and this title concise and descriptive title of your research. It should be reflect the focus of the study. Hope you remember that earlier I said your research topic should consist with 3 things. It should reflect your dependent variable, independent variable or variables, and the sample. So once you write down your working title, then you need to write the background of your study. So here it simply says sets the context by providing a background information. In here, you are going to write the importance of your research. Now, the next topic is research problem, but I want to tell it at this moment. So here you want to illustrate why we consider this research problem as this much important. That's what you need to write under the background. So you need to discuss the current trends, current debate, current argument of the topic under consideration under the background of the study. Then we are moving to the research problem. So all of us know that first we need to do a literature review. Thereby we want to identify certain gaps. There could be limited number of studies that have been conducted in a particular area, or the results are not conclusive, or still the certain questions are not answered. So this gives the rise to develop the research problem. Right. So here you can say that clearly defines the issue or the gap in the knowledge the researcher will address. So simply those gaps, you need to write it as a problem under the research problem. So then you need to derive your research question or questions from your research problem. So here it says list the specific question. So your research question should be specific, very clear. Then, based on your research question, you can derive your research objective or objectives. That simply says what the study intend to achieve. So this is the objective of your study. This is why you are doing this particular research, your research objective. Then the topic number 6 will be the significance of the study. So explain why the research is important and its potential impact. Now, when it comes to the significance of a research, we call it as the contribution as well. There are three things. You need to write the significance to the existing literature, significant to the theory, and significant to the practical aspects or the practical significance. When it's come to the significant to the existing literature, many researches have been conducted based on your topic. So you need to give some sort of a value addition based on the outcome of your research results. So you can simply say, yes, there are many researchers that have been done under this area. They provided these conclusions. Accordingly, this is my conclusion. And another researcher can use my conclusion to develop his or her research. So that is simply what you are going to do under the significance to the existing literature. Then the second one is significant to contribution to the theories. We know that we are using very specific theories related to our research. So we need to give some sort of a value addition to the theory. We can simply say, still the theory validates based on the outcome of the research results. We can conclude that still the theory validates, something like that. Then the other one is the practical contribution that you are going to give, right? So your research output will be used by different practitioners. Accordingly, they are in a position to sort out the issues related with that particular area, right? So that is the practical significance that you are going to give. So you need to write them in a very specific way. Basically, you can use three paras for this because it touches the significance to the existing literature, theory, and practical significance. Then the other one is literature review. So we know that in our previous video, we discussed that for you to come up with the suitable research topic, researchable research topic, you need to read more. So you need to read and understand the current trends, current arguments, current debate, what is happening, why it is happening, many things based on this literature review. So this helps you to identify the gaps in the current knowledge, justifies the need for your study, whether it is actually needed or not, whether the problem is already sorted, so no point of looking it again, right? So whether it is a green signal or a red signal, right? So such things could be given by the literature review. And also it shows how your research builds upon or differs from existing studies, right? So you may read a lot of articles and you understood that yes, this has not been touched, so I'm going to touch it. And the other one is the conceptual framework followed by a hypothesis as a separate section before the proposed methodology. Now here, many authors developed their conceptual framework and they illustrated their hypothesis at the end of the literature review as a separate section but before the proposed methodology. But some authors, they do the same thing inside this particular methodology section. So it is up to the author to decide it as appropriate. Then the eighth one is the proposed methodology. So in here, the researcher has to specifically mention whether his study is a quantitative, qualitative, or a mixed one, how he is going to measure these variables, that is the operationalization. Then what about the population and how the author is going to derive his or her sample from that population? Is there any conditions? What is the sampling technique? Many things. And the data collection method, whether it is a primary data or a secondary data, how we are going to collect using surveys, interviews, and the data analysis techniques, right? So if it is a regression analysis, how we are going to do it, and the ethical considerations, if any. So this basically touches how you will handle the issues like consent, confidentiality, and etc. So basically, when you are going for the interview, certain confidential information may be needed. So you need to properly arrange a suitable mechanism to protect the confidentiality. So that's what comes under ethical consideration. You need to specifically mention a particular statement or statements regarding this. Right. So these are the first 8 topics that we need to come across: the working title, background of the study, research problem, research questions, objectives, significance of the study, literature review, the proposed methodology. Then we need to provide a particular timeline. So usually we are using a Gantt chart. Now here it says a proposed schedule of the research phases and key milestones. So you need to simply say these are the tasks within the research that you have to do, and you are going to complete those tasks on these dates or in these months. Likewise, you need to show. And sometimes you need to submit a budget, because if it is that much of an impactful research, definitely you need to incur a certain cost, because you may have to travel, you may have to go and ask questions from many people. So several estimated cost for resources, travel equipment, software, and etc. will be there. And finally, you need to acknowledge. So simply the list of all sources cited in your proposal should be properly acknowledged using Harvard, APA, or any other referencing format. So these are the topics that helps us to design the research proposal. So title should be there, background of the study should be there, research problem should be there, research questions and objectives should be there, significance of the study should be there, literature review, proposed methodology. Thereby, you can see the timeline, budget, and the references should be there. So before move into look at a particular example, now some of the students they have a particular issue with regard to the number of wordings that this research proposal needs. Usually, when it's come to an undergraduate level, the minimum word requirement may be from 500 to 1000. And if it is a postgraduate master level qualification or thesis, the proposal may be in between 1000 to 2000 minimum word count. When it's come to the PhD, the minimum word count for a proposal may be vary in between 1500 to 3000, which all the things are determined in the particular institution or the degree program. So, with that note, let's move on to identify a simple example of a research proposal. So here I have just illustrated within 2 or 3 lines about the background, literature review, methodology, but it's bit more than that. So I want to explain the requirement of each and every 11 titles that we have discussed earlier on. What are their needs? So I believe that once we discuss about this particular example, you will definitely be in a position to write your research proposal. Okay, so let's look at the working title. Here I have taken an example, right? So you can see it's the impact of debt financing on the financial performance, evidence from listed manufacturing companies in Sri Lanka. So this is the proposed research topic. Now here you can see this research topic. Once you look at this particular research topic, you can see the independent variable, dependent variable, as well as the sample. So the independent variable is debt financing, dependent variable is financial performance, and the sample you can see here, it's listed manufacturing companies in Sri Lanka. So then you need to write a background. As I said earlier, you need to justify, you need to indicate why this research is this much important. Now I am going to talk about the research problem after the background. So I consider this research problem because of this importance. Likewise, you have to elaborate everything in this background of the study. What is the current debate of this particular topic? What is the current argument? Likewise. Now here you can see under the background, it has been written like debt financing plays a crucial role in a firm's capital structure, influencing both growth potential and financial risk. These are some of the example references. And in developing economies like Sri Lanka, manufacturing firms often rely on debt to finance expansion, yet the impact of debt on financial performance remains unexplored in this context. Again, followed by some example references. Now, here you can see it tells the importance of this debt financing, financial performance, and the impact of these two to the manufacturing companies. You need to have definitely strong justifications under your background of the study. And also, most of the time, your statement should be backed by references. If it is more than one, two, or more than two references, that's good enough because your statements are very strong. So you're bringing the arguments by using more than two references. It gives some sort of a strong justification for you to conduct your research. Thereby, you need to come up to the research problem as the third topic. Now, we know that we have to read literature to identify certain gaps, whether there are any under research areas, or sometimes the results may not be conclusive, and also there are some questions which are not answered. So, to identify such things, you need to do a critical review of literature. Thereby, you can identify those gaps and you can write them as a research problem under this title. Now, here you can see it says, despite the growing reliance on debt financing in Sri Lanka's manufacturing sector, there's a limited empirical evidence on how it impacts the financial performance, specifically in terms of profitability, set by these three examples. Now, you can see more than two references gives a very strong validity for this particular statement because you need to bring arguments, you need to prove, yes, these people have said these things, these people have said these things, likewise. And it says, further, existing results about the impact of debt financing and financial performance are not conclusive, which means here you can see another references have been indicated, example references. Please consider these three letters as names of the authors. Right now, here again, I'm saying further, the existing results about the impact of debt financing and financial performance are not conclusive, which means that these authors, some of these authors have said that there is a positive impact between these two. Some authors said that there's a negative impact between these two. Some says there is no any impact. So you cannot come to a conclusion about the exact impact. What is the exact impact? So that is why you are doing this research. So this gives the raise for the research problem, right? So when you are writing this background of the study, if you have written it very strongly with strong justifications and all, the reader could understand, yes, this is the way that this researcher has written this, and this could be the problem. So likewise, he can predict. He can predict because you have written it nicely. Each and every statement is having a proper link. Each and every paragraph is having a proper link. You do not discuss many things in a paragraph, only one or two things. That's simply the academic writing, right? So from this research problem, now you are going to derive your research question. So here you can see it is simply what is the impact of debt financing on the financial performance of listed manufacturing companies in Sri Lanka? So that is derived based on the research problem because it clearly says the results are not conclusive. The exact impact is silent. So you need to question it. Yes, what is the impact? You need to question this. That is what here you are doing. Then based on your research question, you are developing your research objective. How you are using the term to here, then to examine the impact of debt financing on financial performance of listed manufacturing companies in Sri Lanka. So that is your research objective. Then the significance of the study, hope you remember that. Earlier I said, yes, you need to provide the contribution to the existing literature, contribution to the theory, plus practical contribution. So here it says the study provides insights for policymakers, investors, and financial managers on the optimal use of debt financing to enhance the financial performance, supporting evidence-based financial decision making in Sri Lankan manufacturing sector. So likewise, here it mostly considers the practical contribution, but to get the practical contribution, you need to write the theoretical as well as contribution to the existing literature as we discussed earlier. After that, you need to write the literature review. So I believe you all have some sort of an idea about the literature review. Now here it's you are not going to write the the entire story because it's your research proposal. Main points you need to highlight. So here you can see it says past studies have shown mixed results. Could be positive, could be negative, or both, or no results on the impact of debt financing on financial performance, according to these sources. So some suggest that debt improves financial performance through discipline, while others highlight increased financial distress risk, according to these authors. So this study identifies a gap in evidence specific to the Sri Lankan manufacturing firms. So now you can see most of the statements which I have written has been backed by references, which means these statements are very strong, right? Very strong. So it justify the importance of your research. So based on your literature review, we can develop our conceptual framework as well as the hypothesis. Now, hope you remember that I said some authors they bring this conceptual framework and the hypothesis at the end of the literature review, but some bring this into their methodology. So when it's come to the conceptual framework, it is a graphical illustration of your research. So once somebody look at your conceptual framework, he or she should be in a position to identify what you're going to do. Simply, he or she should be in a position to identify your research topic or your research objective. Now here you can see this particular conceptual framework. The debt financing is the independent variable where the financial performance is the dependent variable. And this arrow is towards the right hand side to financial performance because we are going to identify the impact of debt financing on financial performance. Now here you can see that's a symbol H1 that is hypothesis. So let's move to the hypothesis development title. So hypothesis, here I have written a plural one because I have a one objective and a one hypothesis. So hypotheses are simply testable assumptions. You assume something and it should be testable. If those two conditions are there, it is a hypothesis. It's an assumption and it could be tested. Very simple. So we are developing our hypothesis based on our objective. So our objective one is there, even though we do not want to write it because only one objective is there, but I have written it because sometimes when you are developing your research proposal, you may have more than one research objectives, thereby more than one hypothesis. So better you clearly indicate, yes, this is my objective number one, and this is the objective. So here you can say it says to examine the impact of debt financing on the financial performance of listed manufacturing companies in Sri Lanka or firms in Sri Lanka. That is the objective. So corresponding hypothesis for that is there is a significant impact of debt financing on the financial performance of listed manufacturing firms in Sri Lanka. So you can see that both objective one and the hypothesis are mostly same, but here this is the different. When you are writing the hypothesis, you indicate something like that. There is a significant impact. You assume that there will be a significant impact, right? So you need to write that 3 or 4 words there, and again, simply that is the remaining part of your objective, the rest, right? So we assume that there will be a significant impact. Now, you might have seen that some write the hypothesis like there is a significant positive impact, significant negative impact, likewise. It depends on author to author, but if we write in such a way, our research is little bit more biased because we are predicting positive impact. We are predicting negative. Simply, we are expecting positive impact. We are expecting negative impact. Likewise, so better you write it as an open statement. There's a significant impact. It could either be a negative or a positive or no impact. Because in your literature review, we have identified a gap that there are mixed results. Positive impact is also there, negative impact also there, no impact also there. So we should want to keep this as open, rather more towards on positive, negative, or no, right? So objective wise, you need to develop your hypothesis. So the next one is, yes, the proposed methodology, right? So when you're developing your research report, the methodology is the third chapter, very critical chapter. But when it's come to the proposal, it's bit still critical, but you are just saying this is my proposed methodology because it's the word says propose. So under the research design, you need to clearly illustrate whether it is a quantitative or a qualitative one, but here it's a quantitative one. And we need to go for a panel data analysis. I believe you know what panel data analysis are. Then we need to operationalize. Hope you remember that earlier I said we need to clearly indicate how we are going to measure these things because our independent and dependent variables should be measured. Right? So this is the way that you do this. Very simple. Operationalization means how we are going to measure them. You need to tell this is the way that I'm going to measure this. Now we have our dependent and independent variables. So financial performance is the dependent variable and the debt financing is the independent variable. So this is the concept, right? This is the concept as you can see here. Then here I have indicated I am using ROE or the return on equity as a variable to capture the financial performance. And I'm using debt to equity ratio as a variable to capture the debt financing. Then I'm going to measure the ROE using this net income divided by shareholders equity. So we call it as indicator or the measurement. And we are going to measure the debt to equity ratio using total debt divided by total equity. So we have the concept, financial performance and debt financing. So these two are being captured by return on equity and debt to equity ratio. So we measure the return on equity like this, and we measure the debt to equity like this. So this is what we known as operationalization. Operationalization. So we need to specifically say this is how we are going to measure our dependent and independent variable. And here I have indicated the source as well. You can come up with more than two sources because it again says the strong justification. Most of the time researchers use this because these are validated ones. Accordingly, I'm also using these things. Likewise, you can say. And then you need to identify your population. That is simply according to our research topic, that is the listed manufacturing companies in Colombo Stock Exchange, and you need to provide the date that you're going to gather data. And from these manufacturing firms, you need to determine your sample. There could be several conditions, criterias that you may look into. So you need to clearly list down them. And it indicates out of your population, these are the criterias that you are going to look into, derive your sample. Then the data collection method should be there. So here we are going to get the data from the annual reports, which is already available. So it's secondary data, the data analysis. Now our objective is to examine the impact. If it is an impact, you need to run a regression analysis. So to run the regression analysis, there are a lot of softwares available. So here I have indicated eViews. Right? So you may have startup and many things. An ethical consideration. So since we are using publicly available financial data, so confidentiality will be respected. Yes, this is already available, right? Already available one. Then the final three topics. Timeline. You can use a Gantt chart, but here I haven't used it. I just illustrated using a table. So you can simply say the proposal development, yes, first month. The data collection will be in between 2 to 3 months. Data analysis in month 4 and 5, and final report writing month 6. So likewise, you need to provide the framework, time framework for your task. And yes, if applicable, you have to indicate the budget as well, right? Because if it is a, that much of an impactful research, definitely you have to do something, and you need certain amounts for expenses. Here I have indicated simply data access and software for 10,000, printing and miscellaneous 5,000. So altogether it's 15,000. So budget lines should be clear, right? And you need to have a proper accountability of these amounts. And finally, references as per the recommended referencing style. So it could be Harvard, APA, or related one. So this is an example of a research proposal, and you need to expand this. So what my objective was to provide the requirement of each and every title. So you know what to do under each and every title, right? So you need simply the title, the working title, the background, research problem, questions, objectives, literature review, proposed methodology, timeline, budget, and references. So hope this video is informative. So if so, you can like and subscribe. So thank you. Have a nice day.